Good evening. Why don't we get started, unless I'm jumping the gun. I'm Michael Waldman. I'm the Executive Director of the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. We want to welcome you to this event. We want to thank the panelists who are here to join us. I've never been in this room before, and I will assure you that all the other classrooms don't look precisely like this, but this would be a good thing if they did. We're really thrilled to have all of you here. We want to thank our colleagues, Susan Lehman and Janine Plant-Cherlin and Susan Liss, who worked so hard on this event, especially Susan Lehman. And this is an important conversation for us to be having today, given the stakes for the country and the Constitution that we see unfolding both in the waning days of this session of the Supreme Court and the early days of the nomination fight, or at least discussion, for Judge Sotomayor. For those of you who don't know, the Brennan Center for Justice is a think tank and public interest law firm and advocacy group that focuses on democracy and justice. We're proud to be affiliated with the law school. We are named after and seek to take our spirit from Justice Brennan, who not only was one of the great, productive, and influential justices in American history, but also had a spirit of judging, a spirit of humanity, of what he called simple human decency at the core of the Constitution, that we try to follow in our work, and that will be at least part of what we're hoping to see in the next justice in the Supreme Court. The topic that we asked our discussants to take up today, of course, was a little mischievous. We said, umpire or empathy, what do we want in a Supreme Court justice? We should make it clear that both the topic and this event were chosen before we knew who was going to be nominated by President Obama. We knew somebody would be nominated. And so this is not and ought not be a debate in particular on the qualifications of Judge Sotomayor. I keep jumping the gun. And several people have said, well, that's a bad framing. Why do you pick those topics? And of course, to give you the cliff notes on this, it was Chief Justice Roberts who has said that justice of the Supreme Court should be an umpire. It was President Obama, back when he was Senator Obama, who said that a justice should be somebody above all with empathy. And of course, there are many other ways to look at the broad question of who is best to serve us on the Supreme Court. We are very lucky to have some of the best people in the country to discuss this, and I will hand it off to them. First of all, our moderator this evening is Dahlia Lithwick. Dahlia is the senior editor of Slate.com. She's the legal columnist for Newsweek, somebody you've read and heard, who is a leading commentator on the Supreme Court and a leading journalist covering the court. Burt Neuborne is to her right or left, depending on how you look at it. Burt is the, we'll see, is the legal director of the Brennan Center and was one of the founders of the organization, is of course a professor here at NYU School of Law and former legal director of the ACLU. Professor Stanley Fish, we're really delighted, could join us. He is a professor of law at the University of Florida, has taught law in a number of places. He reminded me as we were coming over in the cab, he said that he had taught in Chicago and in Providence, Rhode Island, but until he saw Albany this week, he had not seen incompetent corruption of the kind that we're all getting to see here. He is also, as those of you know, a columnist for the New York Times Online on law, and constitution, and public policy. And finally, John Payton. John is the Director, Counsel, and President of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which, among other things, is a sister organization, is a tremendous leader in the fight for civil rights, was the job held by a previous great Supreme Court justice. And John came to the Inc. Fund from a long time as a leading attorney in Washington, D.C. at the law firm Wilmer Hale. And we're both thrilled to have you here and thrilled to have you in New York and as a colleague. And with that, I will pass it off to Dahlia. I will only say that when the time comes after the brief discussion and conversation among the panelists, when you all have a chance to weigh in and ask questions, this is being videotaped. Please push the button. Just like in the United Nations Security Council, you have to push the button to be heard. So with that, thank you very much.
It's my first test. I pushed the button. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to Susan and the Brennan Center for organizing this terrific panel. It's a real honor to be moderating this event. There's a famous story that most of you have probably heard of two famous jurists. One was with the unfortunate name of Learned Hand, which gets a big laugh the first day of the first year of law school. The other, Oliver Wendell Holmes, known to be one of, if not the giant, when it came to constitutional law, and they were dining together, and as Oliver Wendell Holmes' carriage was rolling away, Learned Hand said, in the way that one greeted one another in those days, "Do justice, sir, do justice." And Oliver Wendell Holmes stopped his carriage and looked out and said, "That is not my job, sir. My job is to apply the law." And I thought that was a good story to frame the conversation we're going to have today, because there is, I think, this perceived tension or real tension we're about to find out between judges who do justice and judges who just apply the law. And it funnels sort of nicely into the topics that we were given of empathy versus umpiring. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to speak for 5 to 7 minutes on the topic, and then we're going to talk to each other about what we've just said. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce John Payton for opening remark.
Thank you, Dahlia. Okay, thank you, Dahlia. I'm actually going to try to talk about Justice Holmes and put all this in context from your kickoff. Let me start by saying a little bit about who I am